Good morning, everyone. Let's start with a quick demo. I'll go through the code and explain what happens. In the end, I'll show how injecting LLMs can speed up the development and autocorrect in case of errors. The goal is to handle the Windows calculator. So, start. In case you might have missed it, let's just remove this again once more. You see the VBA script has put the calculator to the forefront and click the elements as defined in my action sheet. This is very powerful in handling pop-ups, but also just to handle any other application. Before looking at the code, let's briefly look at the Excel. I have 3 Excel sheets, the actions. Here I define what action to take in what order, like setting the foreground, clicking buttons, and reading a field. I have a temp sheet that I won't use in this demo, but I'm using it just to list all the elements of all the windows when I was setting up the actions. And lastly, the data sheet, where I have the action types listed that I can use in my action sheet. The goal of this mini project is just to handle the Windows calculator. However, you can also use it for other windows like pop-ups, but also just applications. Let's have a look at our code. First off, we go to Tools, References, and make sure the UI automation client is ticked. If you can't find it, just click Browse and you will find it in the Win32. Everything starts from the execute action, so this is the procedure that is called from the start button. You're just setting some worksheets, getting the root element of your windows, and then we start looping through all the elements as defined in your action worksheet. Once you have them in your variables, here we will see what action do we actually want to take in this first step. All these steps, they are defined by me. You can give them different names if you want to. The main point is that you are linking whatever you're writing here in the column A action to whatever is in your VBA code. Instead of explaining what's happening, we just run through it and it might make more sense. First off, set to foreground. It's fairly clear. This one does not have a separate function. It will just do what it's supposed to do. Next in the loop, we have click button number 1. For this one, there is a function. So we go to the function and you will see we're getting the button first, and you will see we're looking for the button, and once we have found it, we will invoke the activity. This will be the same for all the other buttons. The only different thing that we still have is reading the display. So in the end, we have read value, where we have 2 functions, read from field by automation ID and read from field by name. Name and ID, if you're familiar with automation to RPA tools, you will also be aware that you have multiple ways of selecting a button or a field. So here I have implemented 2, one by name, one by ID, and depending on the situation, one might be better than the other. Getting a field name, just reading the value here, which is display is 6. You might want to clean this up because obviously you might just want to have the 6. And I'm returning it and then writing it to the Excel sheet. Now, this approach, you can change everything in here to your own tests. You might have to look for what is the exact name or the automation ID of an element you want to handle, but in the end, it shouldn't be too hard to find it. Obviously, you're still mapping out the flow manually, so there's no automation in the setup as such. Once it's set up, then you can run it automatically. Recently, OpenAI launched its operator. It looks cool, but my guess is that it works like a project published on Cobus Graylink's blog in November. The idea is to create functions, make them available to an LLM to trigger, and let the LLM decide what function to trigger in what order. For example, those functions might be moving a mouse, clicking a button, and so on. So when you look up very basic things like a recipe, there will be multiple calls to the LLM in the background. First off, 1 or more calls just to define the steps, But then also after a step is taken, the LLM needs to reevaluate what's happening on the screen. So this gets incredibly computational heavy. It looks cool, but it's a couple of things that I would find more interesting are automating your setup. So now I am using a function where I'm basically just reading all the elements that are on my screen and I'm presenting them here in the temp folder. I think you could use some LLM to better filter out what might be the relevant ones, and this might help you in creating your flow for bigger projects. So it would be a one-time setup with your LLM, but then the running of the of the automation would still be a classic script. That's one. And then a second is that instead of continuously verifying where we are, what are the next steps with an LLM, I would rather opt for a way where we have automations running, and if something unexpectedly happens, then we can use an LLM to analyze what is happening, for example, an unexpected pop-up, and you could take the necessary action like clicking it away or maybe something else.